say goodbye to this storm. Amy?
All right, Ginger, thanks so much. And now to a shocking corruption scandal in Baltimore. 7 police officers indicted on federal charges accused of stealing money from innocent people. ABC's Lindsay Davis joins us now with all of those details. Good morning, Lindsay.
Good morning, Amy. We've heard similar storylines before on the big screen and on primetime television. But now these real-life officers have been charged with abusing their badges, of being corrupt to the core, allegations of extortion, falsifying police reports, and stealing from citizens. These 7 Baltimore City police officers arrested, charged with being hardcore criminals. The allegations range from stealing from innocent citizens to robbing drug dealers of cash and guns, some even of selling heroin.
These defendants allegedly were involved in stopping people who had not committed crimes and seizing their money, not only seizing their money, but pocketing it. So these are really simply robberies by people who are wearing police uniforms.
The alleged stealing from city residents was rampant, with amounts stolen ranging from $200 to $200,000. Prosecutors say the corruption included bogus search warrants, filing false police reports, and even putting in for thousands of dollars in overtime while on vacation.
These officers, they're 1930-style gangsters, as far as I'm concerned.
And authorities say there was a widespread cover-up, which involved coaching of each other to give false statements to internal affairs and turning off body cameras at key moments. It all sounds a lot like an episode from HBO's The Wire, the long-running police and drug drama that takes place in Baltimore. In this episode, officers stuff cash from a raid in their bulletproof vests. This morning, the 7 officers are charged with racketeering. Some of the suspects face up to life in prison, others decades in jail.
The majority of Baltimore City police officers are going to be really pleased today to see these charges brought against people who are accused of betraying their badges, of betraying their trust to the department.
There was a year-long operation in place to take these officers down. They were even wiretapped by the FBI. The U.S. attorney involved is calling this a major abuse of power. In some cases, they would just stop an ordinary citizen, hadn't been accused of doing anything, and they would steal their money from them.
Wow. So blatant.
Right, yeah.
Okay, Lindsay, thanks very much. We're going to get the latest fallout now from that terror attack at the Pulse nightclub.
In prison while awaiting.
Shocks me as much as it does anyone.
On HLN.
In a city where emotions are still raw between police and its citizens, a city that shook with violent riots 2 years ago over the arrest and the death of Freddie Gray, 7 Baltimore police officers have now been accused of doing the unthinkable. All 7 of them are members of the department's Gun Trace Task Force, and they are in a world of trouble. A federal indictment is accusing them of scheming to steal money, as much as $200,000 in just one single case. The feds say that they stole property and drugs, but that some of those victims were actually innocent people who were not committing crimes. The allegations are that the cops did this by detaining people, by entering their homes, by conducting traffic stops, by serving fake search warrants, and even billing for unworked overtime. And we're not talking just a little, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. Baltimore's police chief is calling the charges a punch in the gut.
These officers, they're 1930-style gangsters, as far as I'm concerned. The misdeeds and the criminal misconduct that they're engaged in shocks me as much as it does anyone in this room.
Phil Yakubuski is a reporter and an anchor for WBAL. He joins me live from Baltimore. Phil, I'm not entirely sure that you have recovered from the riots in your town, from dealing with officers and indictments, and then the end of that, and the settlements and the money, and now this.
Yeah, it's been certainly a heck of a 24 hours here in Baltimore as the city learned about these 7 police officers which have been arrested for, like you said, the unthinkable. Many people in this community and, of course, all over the country expect police officers to be good citizens and to be good cops. And as the police chief said today, he said these are bad cops and dirty cops, and he said we're going to get them off the street.
So the U.S. Attorney for the District of Maryland, where you are, had a couple of choice things to say as well, but then got kind of specific about some of the theft. And I want you to hear from Rod Rosenstein about a couple of the things he detailed when they announced this really ugly situation.
One of these instances, the allegation, the largest allegation actually, is that they stole $200,000 from one victim. And the smallest one was a couple $100 from a fellow who had earned it in a legitimate business. This is robbery. This is not legitimate law enforcement activity. I think it's important to make that point.
So, Phil, the thefts, I mean, I remember reading some of these details in the release from the federal government, that they would actually, like, play along with one another and set up these kind of sting things where they would pretend to be people other than they were and enter people's homes and literally take bundles upon bundles of money out of one particular case. The shakedown seemed to sort of have no particular MO, though. I mean, they were taking money from $20 to like this, $200,000 from one guy.
Yeah, it really is, again, the unthinkable. If you read the charging documents here, one of the cases is up to, as you said, $200,000. Another situation was involving a guy who had an automobile business, and he would buy automobiles for cash at auction. He worked at a nursing home here in Baltimore City, all along with his family. And he was shaken down by them, allegedly, for, a lot of money, thousands upon thousands of dollars. In another instance, they actually went to a storage facility where the money was taken out of socks and shoe boxes, and again, from what the federal government had to say here. So, yes, it was tens of thousands of dollars that a lot of people had stolen from them.
And so as we see the racketeering indictments, by the way, racketeering is one of those things where most Americans would say, what is racketeering? And it's just this huge catch basket of getting guys on this kind of ugly gangster sort of business. But I was amazed by the aliases that many of these cops allegedly were employing, like G-Money and Lil Brill and Chewy and Twan and Munch and Lou. And I mean, it was not lost on the officers who are prosecuting this. They said this was like a 30s-style gangster unit.
Right, that's what the police commissioner said today. In fact, Detective Gondo, who was essentially, if you read through this, sort of like the quote-unquote ringleader of this group, he's accused of dealing drugs. And when you read the wiretaps that were released in those court papers yesterday, he had all kinds of language that he used about how he would set up sting operations and they would sell drugs and how they would steal drugs allegedly from one person and deal it in the next. And all of that cash funnel to all different types of things. And by the way, there's the overtime issue here. Aside from all of the issues with the drugs and the guns and all of that other stuff, there's the overtime problem. All of these officers are accused of racking up $400,000 in unused overtime. Some of these officers almost doubled their salaries, according to these charging documents.
We're putting up the graphic right now. You know what? We're putting it up right now so people can actually see the salary versus how much they made in overtime. And you're right. In many cases, it was almost entirely double. In other cases, it was like another 50% as much. I want to bring Darren Porcher back into this conversation and also bring in Joey Jackson and Heather Hansen, both defense attorneys, to sort of sift through where they go from here. First and foremost, Darren, as a cop and a retired detective, there is this blue wall of silence, and it seemed that a lot of these guys were allegedly making sure that no one ratted out the other. And they are charged with obstruction in this as well, because they were sort of making sure the stories were all the same, making sure that we say this instead of this so that, we got our stories straight. It's got to be really hard to prosecute cops because these guys are on the inside.
Well, I was a lieutenant in the Internal Affairs Bureau in the NYPD, and one of the issues that I see here is there's a strong cultural disconnect between the executives and the officers that are committing these acts. the police department needs to implement a proactive mechanism in combating corruption as opposed to being reactive.
And
because when we look at this case,
they need to supervise the overtime. You need to get your overtime cleared before you charge it, because I don't know how you get to hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars before someone says, this looks weird. Joey Jackson, real quick. Great question from one of our producers today. What happens to convictions that these guys might have been involved in? Because there could be dozens upon dozens of people who are convicted by dirty guys, allegedly dirty guys.
It turns it upside down and on its head. Where's the credibility? What can you rely upon? And, you know, look, I don't have an issue with overtime, but doing overtime or saying you're doing it while you're on vacation or while you're shopping or while you're gambling, that's another matter. And I'll tell you something else. It will not be difficult to prosecute these officers, because what the federal government does is they build their case, then they arrest you. So they have you on wiretap. They know where you are. They know where you've been. They know what you've done. And so with this paper trail, it's hard to overcome. And it just sets such a terrible stain on wonderful police officers who do a great service for communities.
And Heather, they apparently were stinging this for a year. So they got lots and lots of, shall we say, reams and reams of tape. But the question is, you got some guys who are accused of being a part of it, and you got other guys who are massively involved in it, plus drug offenses. They not only were allegedly stealing drugs from drug dealers, but then dealing them themselves. We're talking heroin that resulted in death. So we're looking at a big range for these guys,
and that's it. And you've got to take each of these people separately, and you have to have each of them have their own defense attorneys, because there are some that were only minimally involved and maybe not involved at all, and there were others who were really the ringleaders. And I think it's important to sort of step back and say that some of these gentlemen may not actually be guilty. These are just indictments. Nothing has been proven. And I think that at least two of them weren't actually present at the majority of the interactions.
But 1 year of being, you know, tapped, and oh man, it's going to be. Wait till we get that case and some of the transcripts.
By their own words.
Oopsie. All right, hold on, guys. Got another story that I want to share with our audience tonight about a police officer landing on the wrong side of the law. You may remember that back in January, Jeff Bunner quit the Flagstaff, Arizona police force before he could be fired because of this whole punching thing, punching a woman as he was trying to arrest her, and it was on tape back in November. Have a look.
You cannot arrest me until I know I have a warrant.
Hey!
Hey!
Hey, you can't hit a girl like that!
Her like that!
Hey, what the f***?
You can't
you videotape that? Hell yeah, videotape.
hit her like that! Did you videotape that? Give me your hand. You can't hit her like that!
Officer Slap.
Punch her in the face!
That cell phone video went viral, and now former Officer Bunner is facing criminal charges. He's been indicted on 2 counts of aggravated assault. Quite possibly that will be evidence in the case. In Florida, a late-night fight in a Walmart parking lot turned into a manhunt that left one of the
friendship. Former President George W. Bush revealing what was behind this moment.
This take a year.
That raid yielded valuable intelligence, including hundreds of contacts for Al-Qaeda. And probably in Georgia tonight. Deputies pulling their son from both in the region and in the West. Back here at home tonight, and to a mother and father in Georgia seeking justice in the death of their son. Newly released dashcam video shows deputies pulling their son from his car, tasing him, one of them kneeling on his neck. Their son did not survive, and ABC's Steve Osunsami is in Georgia tonight.
The parents of the Georgia teenager behind the wheel of this pickup truck don't deny tonight that their son was on drugs and probably shouldn't have been racing away from police in the middle of the night. But they believe what happens next after he's pulled out of the truck is nothing but murder.
I think they should be punished.
I have never seen a cop car that says on the side to hunt down and kill. It says to protect and serve.
The police dashcam video is from 2015. 18-year-old Nicholas Dijksma is still feeling the shock from their stun guns, and now the deputies are on top of him. The part that's most difficult to watch is when one of the deputies keeps leaning his knee onto their son's neck. and then turns him around and does it again. An autopsy from state investigators says it's one of the reasons he died, from compression of the neck and torso.
Hey, still up? Turn him on the side. Hey! Nicholas, wake up!
He hadn't committed a crime, and they killed him. I got a problem with that.
The family is now suing, saying that police violated their son's civil rights and waited too long to give CPR. Authorities aren't commenting while the investigation is ongoing. David?
Steve Osunsami tonight. Thanks, Steve. Next this evening, a new corruption scandal in the Baltimore Police Department, and involves hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxpayer money. 7 officers indicted on federal racketeering charges accused of theft and extortion. The prosecutors saying their crimes were simply robberies by people wearing police uniforms, giving themselves a lot of extra overtime. ABC's Lindsay Davis is in Baltimore tonight.
7 Baltimore City police officers are on the other side of the law tonight, arrested on racketeering charges.
These officers, they're 1930-style gangsters, as far as I'm concerned.
They were all members of an elite gun task force, and their indictment reads like a TV drama. The allegations range from robbing citizens and extorting drug dealers to filing false reports. One of the officers is even accused of possessing and intending to distribute heroin.
This is a punch in the gut for the Baltimore Police Department, but it's a reality and it's a necessity of reform.
They're also accused of stealing amounts ranging from $200 to $200,000 and putting in for fraudulent overtime. One officer was paid nearly double his salary.
Why does an investigation like this take a year?
The worst thing that you can do to erode the public trust is to charge too early and not have those charges stick.
6 of the 7 officers appeared in court today and entered pleas of not guilty. For now, a judge has ordered that the officers remain behind bars. Some of them face up to life in prison. David?
Lindsay, thank you. Next, here to a swift change in the weather coming to much of the country tonight, and it comes after dangerous winds battering the